Now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our new chair, Greg Lowe, as the new independent chair of the BEC. Greg was previously the CEO of BEC. You might be quite familiar with him before in his previous role. He also was the managing director for BEC in Australia. And you might be recognizing Greg from his role as the New Zealand co-chair of the Australia-New Zealand Leadership Forum. So now he's with us as well, which is a great delight. And I hand now over to Greg.
Thank you very much, Tina, and it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning for this Business New Zealand Energy Council meeting and discussion with the Minister of Energy, the Hon Simeon Brown. Welcome, Minister. Great to have you here with us this morning. We do face a challenging environment in the energy sector in New Zealand as manufacturing industry looks to transition its energy use and faces the challenge of doing that in a way that maintains their viability. The transport sector needs to go through a significant decarbonisation process. All of that's going to require more electricity, no matter how we approach energy usage, alternative fuels, more electricity is needed. That's going to put a great demand on generation and on transmission infrastructure. And so we've got a lot to do in New Zealand to go through that kind of very significant transition. I'm also working with a few companies in Australia that are facing similar challenges, and of course Australia is starting from a position that's more challenging than New Zealand as they decarbonise their coal industry or the electricity generation industry, and have just recently announced the decommissioning of 8 terawatts of coal-fired power generation to be replaced by an uncertain mix of electricity generation. So we're in a strong position in terms of our generation infrastructure, but we've got some significant challenges to face and some significant growth to put right across the energy sector. So we're very interested to hear this morning, Minister, your comments and the direction that the government intends to take in the energy sector. The event this morning is hosted by Meridian Energy, sponsored by Meridian Energy, and very pleased to welcome Neil Barclay, who's the CEO of Meridian and has been in that role since 2018. Neil brings extensive experience in both the finance and energy markets, and I'll hand to Neil shortly to make some comments and introduce the Minister. We'll have an opportunity to hear from the Minister. There'll be a Q&A session, and we'll aim to wrap up at around 8:15, and the Minister will stay for a short period to have a chat with you over breakfast as well, and so we'll look forward to that. So now I'll hand you over to Neil. Thank you, Neil, for providing the support to this morning's function, and I'll get you to make a few comments and introduce the Minister.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all, and welcome, Minister. We do appreciate you being here this morning. When I was looking at your portfolio of ministries, it did occur to me, with transport, local government, Auckland and energy, someone's put a bit of thought into that, because there are some clear synergies that go across all of those portfolios that I think will be really helpful in terms of both business.
If it goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And it is important that we have the opportunity as business to engage with ministers directly at events like this. So we do appreciate your time, because we know you get invited to a lot of these things. Just a couple of comments from me, just to lead out. And I'll probably just reiterating what Greg just said, but if you put aside the animal methane thing, the only credible way that we decarbonise this country by 2050 is if we electrify everything that spins, moves and burns fossil fuels. And that for us as a sector creates a massive challenge in terms of it's going to require around about $130 billion of new investment by 2050 to achieve that sort of outcome. But the opportunity is even greater, because with the renewable resources that we have in this country, as we decarbonise the energy sector and as we grow renewable electricity, we will grow our competitive advantage of our country, and we will drive down energy costs for consumers overall, and we will improve the prosperity of all New Zealanders. I genuinely do believe that that's the opportunity that we have to grasp. We do need government support as we work through this process. We need policy settings that facilitate, enable and look to market outcomes that give pricing signals that allow private capital to invest with confidence and do the heavy lifting as we work through this transition. Clearly we need clarity and support in terms of consenting. We're consenting large-scale infrastructure projects, often put into rural environments. No one's looking for a free hit in that regard, but we do need to support to ensure that the national and global benefits of a renewable energy project get appropriately balanced against the local impacts that those projects may be having. And ideally, Minister, we would like policy settings that have a degree of bipartisan political support, because we're investing over multiple decades through multiple governments, and certainty around the policy settings and the market frameworks in which we're investing into is probably the most critical thing that we could have. I think what government and customers can expect or should expect to see from the sector is fair pricing outcomes that allow all New Zealanders to participate in the transition in a way that improves their overall well-being. And clearly, we need customers and the government should expect us to maintain a reliable system and keep the lights on. We do have a fantastic record in that regard, but we have had a few failures. Those failures, when you look into them, are always systems related and system wide, and I think as a sector we have shown an ability to learn from that, and I can assure you that we're very, very focused across the whole sector, ensuring that we don't have glitches and that the lights stay on. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Minister.
I want to acknowledge Tina, Greg and Neil. Thank you for those kind introductory words, and thank you everyone for coming along to this breakfast event. There's a huge crowd of people here from across the sector, a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces, so it's a really pleasure to be able to meet with you all here today. And I was just thinking on the way in, I'm glad that it's raining because you can't tell where the leaks are coming from. So that's one positive today. But I do feel the weight of responsibility with all my portfolios, which includes water reform within the local government portfolio as well. So I do feel the responsibility and the privilege to be the Minister in a number of critical portfolio areas, but also part of a team of ministers who are focused very much on infrastructure and making sure we have the settings set right to be able to invest and create the conditions for investment in our country in the critical infrastructure that we need. And so today's really a great opportunity to be able to talk about the coalition government's approach to energy and how we will be delivering on our commitment to drive investment in renewable electricity through our policies of Electrify New Zealand. And I just want to start by saying that we should be, as a country, really, really proud of our energy system and how renewable it is in comparison to other countries. Where we're starting from is such a long way further forward than where so many other countries are at. And so I think that's something we take for granted, but it's something that we should actually really acknowledge and be really proud of as a country. But energy policy really is about making sure that we balance a number of key critical goals. We have to balance affordability for customers, reliability to keep the lights on, and sustainability to ensure that we are electrifying and that we are meeting those climate obligations that we have. And our government's view is that we can't pursue just one of those goals simply at the expense of others. This means we need to ensure that we have a balanced approach to energy policy, which looks at a range of fuels, generation methods and storage to ensure that we have a resilient, affordable and sustainable system which provides New Zealand the security that energy security it needs going forward. But it's clear to us that that balance has been tipped in the wrong direction under the last government. And one of the key facts which concerns me is the fact that in 2023 we had 5 of the top 10 electricity demand peaks on record, and there's been a number of very serious warnings from energy analysts that our system's electricity supply is going to be very tight this winter and next. This indicates to me that there is something has gone wrong and that we need to ensure that we get the settings right. Over the last 30 years, in my view, New Zealand has had a relatively bipartisan approach to energy policy. Policy settings have been stable and predictable, changes were generally gradual, well signalled, and subsequent ministers of energy were able to adapt those policies to help make the most of New Zealand's energy resources and natural advantages. But under the last government, a number of key decisions were made, which I think tipped that balance in the wrong direction. We saw the last government pursue a 100% renewable energy target by 2030, which was unrealistic and which would simply put impossible costs onto consumers. We saw the pursuit of the Lake Onslow project, which had a chilling effect in terms of investment by the private sector. And of course, we also had the ban on oil and gas exploration, which meant that energy security was put at risk by not having the investment needed into particularly gas, which is a critical feature of making sure that our renewable energy markets are able to be firmed appropriately to keep the lights on. And this approach broke with the mostly bipartisan approach we've had to energy policy over a long period of time. A policy approach which was based on competition, responsive market-based systems, and the ability to send pricing signals to the market to encourage investment. These warnings of a tight electricity supply this winter and next are the result. In an interview earlier this month, Transpower CEO Alison Andrew warned there just isn't enough capacity in the system, and we can also face a dry winter. We don't have enough water, which we rely on very heavily in our system, and if that's the case, we could get into rolling power cuts. Her words echoed MB's similar warnings that I received in the briefing to the incoming minister. Our most immediate challenge is to ensure sufficient electricity generation to meet peak demands during cold winter mornings and evenings. These were the explicit warnings that I received in coming into the role. They are concerning to me and they are concerning to New Zealanders. And for that reason, we need to get our energy settings back on track. So my immediate priorities as Minister of Energy was to do a number of things to reset this approach. Firstly was to scrap the last government's Lake Onslow pumped hydro scheme. This was a very expensive, big government project which was having a chilling effect on the market and sending the wrong market signals. It would effectively put a floor and a ceiling on the price of electricity in New Zealand and destroyed our market-based system in favour of centralised control. This is something that we clearly opposed for a long period of time and was the first thing I did as Minister of Energy was to put that project on the scrap heap. Secondly, we've removed the 100% renewable electricity target by 2030. This target made the perfect the enemy of the good. And I think that's the best way to phrase it. And we all want to see greater renewable energy. We are 100% committed to our 2050 climate obligations, but we need to do that in a way which doesn't put the perfect in the way of actually achieving what we need to do. There is no escaping that we need non-renewable energy as part of the mix over the next period of time as we move towards this greater renewable energy mix as we move towards 2050. Gas is going to play a critical part in that transition, firming wind and solar generation to ensure that we can keep the lights on whilst also providing the settings so that we have greater battery investment and other means as well. So overturning the oil and gas ban is something that my coalition partner and Minister for Resources, the Honourable Shane Jones, is working on currently as a priority to ensure that but also looking at things like carbon capture and storage to ensure that we can provide the certainty to the market so that it can reinvest in gas exploration so that we have that supply for our system here in New Zealand. The government also has removed the Government Investing in Decarbonising Industry Fund, as it doesn't align, in our view, with the role that we see as a government in supporting the energy sector to make investments. It's not our view that we should be, as a government, either picking winners or providing large subsidies to companies. Instead, we should be setting the pricing signals to support energy investors to make those decisions. We've stopped the review of the ETS. We believe that the emissions trading scheme is the critical tool to help support and encourage lower emissions alternative fuels, products and services in a gradual, affordable and organic way, rather than the government coming in over top. So New Zealand has one of the most highly renewable energy sectors in the world, but there's much more that we need to be doing in order to achieve that greater renewability. And we have a policy program we took to the election, which we are now starting work on developing, and we'll have more to say on very soon, Electrify New Zealand, which outlines our direction of travel around how we want to support the electricity and energy sector to be able to achieve those 2050 obligations. And I think the most important part of that is making sure that we can ensure that we get through the resource consenting system, and we give confidence to the market to be able to make those investments. So Electrify New Zealand is not just a small policy, it's a large policy, and it's something which we're working on at the moment, but it includes a number of elements. Firstly, we want to enable renewable generation through reducing the red tape. We want to make sure that solar, wind, geothermal is able to be consented within a maximum of 12 months. We will make changes to the Resource Management Act to enable that. We're also putting in place a fast-track consenting regime, which will enable decisions on consents to be made in a much more rapid way, with ministers making decisions around referral and ensuring that there is a one-stop shop to those consents being made, which I think will make a significant difference, not just in the energy system and energy sector, but across our infrastructure sector, to be able to have confidence that those decisions can be made in a timely fashion, that they cover the suite of consents that are required in order to make those developments happen, and then that enables that confidence to be able to be made. We want to ensure that we are able to have long-term duration consents. We want to make sure that reconsenting is able to happen a lot faster. We want to remove some of the requirements around reconsenting for distribution lines, transmission lines. We'll also be looking at what's required to make it easier to invest in hydrogen and offshore wind as well. And so there's a huge work program that's going to be coming down the pipeline over the next couple of years. We're going to be working very quickly and at pace on all of these changes. The fast-track legislation will be in Parliament by the first week in March. And I know officials in the room are sweating, but that's good because we are working at pace to make that difference, to make that legislation. And we just ask you to really engage in the select committee process on that piece of legislation. We're getting it into the House really quickly. We want to ensure that it enables the industry to get the decisions made that are needed. And so we want your support publicly, but we also want your help to ensure that that piece of legislation is the best possible piece of legislation it can be. So when that comes through into Parliament, we're certainly going to be looking to the industry to support us through that process. We're going to have more to say around the RMA, other changes going forward. Minister Bishop is in charge of that process, but I'm working very closely in relation to what's required to reduce those barriers around consents for renewable generation, reconsents for renewable generation, distribution consents, transmission consents, hydrogen consents. All of those things will be part of those conversations, and we're going to be bringing that to Parliament at some point this year as well. And then in terms of offshore wind, we are working quickly around having legislation in Parliament this year so that we can set up that regime as quickly as possible so that we're able to align what New Zealand's ambitions are around offshore wind with Australia's, so that we're able to enable that industry to be able to achieve economies of scale. So I'm really optimistic about the future. I'm concerned about what we have in front of us right now. And my message is that the top priority this year and next is to make sure that we keep the lights on, and the regulators, their number one role is to ensure that that is what they're focused on. But we are also working at pace to ensure we have the foundations needed so that the market has confidence to make those investment decisions, so that we can achieve our goals of affordability, reliability and sustainability over the long term for New Zealand. So thank you very much for having me. I look forward to taking a few questions from you from the floor, but most importantly, I also look forward to working with you in my role, learning from you, and as a sector, and many of everyone in this room knows a lot more than I do about the energy sector, but looking forward to working with you, learning from you, and making sure that our energy sector has the long-term policy settings in place so we can achieve those objectives together. Thank you very much.
Can you give us some guidance in terms of the kind of discussion environment, the kind of way in which you want to work with industry as we face some of these challenges?
Yeah, it's a good question, and 100% agree. Obviously, engagement is important, but collaboration is even more important in terms of making sure that we get those policy settings right. The energy sector, the Energy Sector Accord, which is being developed by the sector, is I think a really important tool. We've already had some initial conversations around that. We see that as a really good mechanism to help drive that alignment, and we are very keen to move quickly to get that set up, because I think that's going to provide a tool to bring the range of the sector from generation through to distribution and retail and all elements of the sector together to ensure that we get those long-term policy settings right. So we obviously want to not just engage but collaborate. But as I said before, policy changes do need to go through the parliamentary process, and we will need your support to ensure that we're getting the best advice possible through that as well. So we'll be working at pace. We'll engage with you as much as we can through that, but we also want to make sure that you are linked in through the work that is going through Parliament, so that we can make that happen. Obviously, regulation is critically important as well, and I know that officials at MB have really good relationships with the sector, and my expectation is that those relationships continue to get stronger and stronger, so that those conversations can be as productive as possible.
It's good to hear, Melissa. Thank you for that comment. Questions from the floor?
Someone's got to go first. Can you hear me okay?
I can repeat the question if you like.
That's fine. Chris Martin from EcoBold. Pleased to hear priority number one for the next 2 winters is keeping the lights on. Are you aware that there's a proven LED light bulb program that could be rolled out this winter? It would reduce a Hamilton's worth of peak load at an 18:1 benefit to cost ratio and save Kiwis about $195 million per year on their power bills. And question 2, if so, will you champion an LED rollout this winter to help keep the lights on? And love to come and talk to you about this further, by the way.
Yeah, look, good question. The question was EcoBulbs, was from EcoBulb around LED lights and the pitch for rolling out LED lights to reduce the energy peak load. I think you've written to me, and I think I wrote back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, I mean, I guess the role I see around these policy settings. So we can pick winners and we can spend a lot of money, of government money. We want to work to make sure, and this is one of the things that we've got to pick up with ECA, is actually the regulatory system needs to be updated around energy efficiency. And so that's an area where I want to see a lot of work done to actually make sure the regulatory system is being updated. It's old and it's outdated. That's where I think there's a lot of work and a lot of low-hanging fruit available to enable stuff to happen a lot faster.
There was another hand.
Oh, sorry.
Do you want me?
Yes.
No microphone.
I can repeat the question.
Yeah, that would be helpful. May not be necessary, quite loud.
Can you hear him down the back? All good.
Thumbs up at the end.
Keep up that voice.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's very helpfully clear. The thing I'm interested in your view on, Neil said at the beginning, there's really two levers in the economy to reduce emissions, which are agricultural and energy. Last year, everyone got very excited when officials provided advice that New Zealand's shortfall on NDCs could be $24 billion with overseas emissions credits. I'm interested in how you see the opportunity for domestic abatement and energy reducing that bill over the next few years. Whether you've got any numbers in mind as the result of your sort of simplified market-led approach to bring in investment, because in a sense it could be the magic bullet to reduce that.
Yeah, so a question around the NDC and the emissions profile of energy over the next little while. I guess the answer I'd give to you on that one is we're working through the emissions reduction plan number 2 at the moment, which looks at all of those issues in terms of the suite of policies that we're putting forward in transport, in energy, and in other areas as well, in terms of meeting those obligations. And obviously we're taking a market-led approach in terms of energy policy to enable that electrification. That will then flow through into people making decisions around, if you look at transport, in particular the electrification of transport fleets, and you look at the mix of vehicles coming into a country becoming more available at lower and lower price points, I'm confident those changes are going to happen. We need to again there make sure we've got the settings in place to enable that. That's why we're going to have a big focus around electrification, EV charging networks, to make sure that we roll that out faster. So we've got some work that we're starting with MB and Ministry of Transport around that. So don't have numbers in place right here, but we're working through the ERP at the moment, which I think needs to be finished by the end of this year.
Ben. I'll stand up just so others can hear me. So in the energy transition, we've obviously spoken about collaboration and how important that is. Arabs facilitated several of these processes in Wales, the UK, as well as Australia. And almost all of those processes involve some type of government support, either at a regional or a national level, around incentivizing the adoption of some new technologies. Do you see, or what role do you see in government in New Zealand playing in facilitating that collaboration and maybe incentivizing some adoption of technologies that maybe aren't as strong economically at this point?
Yeah, so the question was around, from Arab's perspective in other countries, around the role of government in terms of incentivising other technologies to help electrify.
Energy transition.
Or energy transition. Well, I mean, I guess fundamentally our starting point is that we should be getting the regulatory frameworks in place to enable the sector to make decisions and investment. And the problem is when you start, the problem that you can easily walk into is where you start picking winners or government making significant investments itself, is that you make it more risky for private investment to happen. And so I'm confident that by getting the settings right, whether that's regulatory, whether that's consenting, whether it's other elements, we're able to support the market to be able to make those changes without government having to step in as you've suggested. So that's the approach that we're taking. Again, the emissions trading scheme is going to play a really important role in terms of a pricing signal in a number of those areas, and that's where it will have other. That's where that tool it becomes really important in terms of supporting and making sure those decisions are made. So yes, we could step in and spend billions of dollars. Actually, we've got an emissions trading scheme which I think we need to back, and that will send pricing signals which support the adoption of new types of technologies.
Tina.
I had a question, actually 2 questions if that's okay. The gas transition plan and the energy strategy was something that we worked actually basically as a sector previously on.
Yes.
Obviously it was led by MB, but there was consultation happening, and the sector was lobbying actually for a while to have an all of energy strategy.
Yep.
And the gas transition plan, obviously a big component of that.
Yep.
So my first question is that something similar that you're going to pursue?
Yep.
And the second question is on the rollout of EV chargers.
Yes.
Do you know how this is potentially, or what are your thoughts in terms of administering that big project?
Yeah, so 2 questions. First is around, are we going to have an energy strategy? And the answer to that is yes. So we're getting some advice from MB around that, and obviously we'll go through a process and consult on that. We see that as really, really important, but we don't want it just to be another 400-page document which sits at the bottom of your computer screen to lift it up. So at the same time, we just got to make sure that these things are focused when it comes to these documents. The second question around EV charging. So we're working through some options around that. So obviously, ECA already does a lot of work around EV charging. This is an area where there is some support involved in terms of providing the market some support to help with that transition. Our view is we want to look at the robustness of the cost benefit to make sure that if the government is going to put money in, that we are maximising private sector investment. And so there may be some roles to play around areas where there is low demand or peak demands, where the commercials might not stack up. But ultimately, again, it comes back to the point of ensuring we've got the policy settings set right to encourage the industry and to encourage investors to make those investments as much as possible with as little government support as possible. And the reality is there's lots of people out there wanting to invest in this technology. There's also a lot of challenges that they face around the cost of connections, the variability of connection costs depending on which EDB you turn up to, the consistency of information that's provided, and how easy it is to get that information. So there's a lot that needs to be dealt with. I know the last government did a lot of work on that. We want to build on that to significantly increase the EV charging network that we've got in New Zealand.
Yeah, just here and then down the back. Yeah.
Good morning, Minister. I'm Brian Bull from Litmus Data Tech. We set out this morning the admirable policy of not picking winners, neither in generation nor in networks. You are also Minister for Transport. The transport sector seems rife with picking winners, with ministers deciding on individual transport investment projects.
Right.
Do you think the energy sector has something to teach the transport sector in investment?
Well, that's a very good question, and I guess what I would say is, in terms of my role as Minister of Transport, I mean, I see the number one role in terms of transport is to make sure that we are increasing productivity and economic growth, and that's what it should be. That's what our transport network should be enabling. Now, the question you raised there is around mode and how those decisions should be made. Well, ultimately, we've got a range of policies which will include a range of modes, and so we have to invest in a range of modes, whether that's public transport, roading, rail. It all matters, but at the same time, we need to also unlock private sector investment in terms of investment in our transport network as well. And so we have traditionally had a transport system which is paid for by people filling up their car with petrol or paying road user charges. We haven't really adequately allowed for private sector investment into our transport networks. I think there's huge opportunities in that space, and that's something that we're certainly doing a lot of work on as well.
Down the back, yep. Oh, sorry, just the gentleman behind you, and then you. Yeah.
So my name's Johnny from Thundergrids. We do EV charging infrastructure on the ground. I have a quick question around the state sector decarbonisation fund that previously existed. There's a huge saving the government can make in regards to transitioning its own fleet to electric, and there was a 2025 mandate to do so. Will that mandate still remain, or what's the ambition?
Yeah, so the question was around the government transitioning its own fleet to electric. I don't believe we've made any changes around that particular goal. I think it comes under the Minister for Public Services who sets that particular target. So I'm not aware that she's made any changes to that particular target at all. So that's certainly a continued ambition for the government. There's obviously some vehicles which are a little bit harder to if your police are obviously doing a lot of work around trying to find electric options, and there'll be some areas where it becomes a little bit harder because you need to have certain operational requirements, but we certainly haven't made any changes in that space.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Winnie, and I'm working at the German embassy, and Germany is pretty well known for red tape itself, so very impressed with the speed to bring the piece of legislation to Parliament, and we'll definitely follow it for some inspiration. I actually wanted to raise your attention to a research cooperation between New Zealand and Germany that's
Oh, yes.
at the Taylor University. It's on the storage of green or hydrogen, green hydrogen necessarily. And as I understand, hydrogen is potentially very interesting for all farmers and people who have to operate heavy machinery. So I wanted to know whether you were aware of it and what role hydrogen might play.
Yeah, so I think the question was around hydrogen. I wasn't aware of the research project, but very keen to learn more around that particular research project. And hopefully we can inspire through this fast track some further conversations. But yeah, I mean, as I said, hydrogen will certainly play a role. And I know there's particularly a lot of interest in the heavy transport sector that hydrogen can play. Obviously, we want to look at what the regulatory hurdles are to unlock that, to support that investment. The work we're doing around offshore wind generation, I think, has huge opportunities to tie in with hydrogen development by creating that significant supply of renewable energy, which can then be made available at times of low demand. It can be stored, it can be used for hydrogen. There's huge opportunities. The role of government is to make sure that we are enabling as much energy generation as we can, and for it to be used in a variety of ways.
One more question. Right, here we go.
Thank you. It's Tracy from the Electricity Networks Minister. The sector's very committed and focused on decarbonising and climate change goals. How do we reconcile that when we've got also a Minister of Resources who very publicly talks about climate change being a fairy tale?
Oh, so the question is around some comments by Shane Jones. I think the point that Shane is making is that we need to make sure we can keep the lights on when it comes to ensuring we've got the gas supply to keep the lights on, and he's really concerned about the decision, and he acknowledges he was part of that government which made those decisions, and the impact it's had has been really bad, and so we need to take a balanced approach, as I've outlined in my speech. It's really about we need to balance those three elements of making sure we've got an affordable energy market, a reliable energy market, which is where gas plays a really important role, and a sustainable energy market, which means making sure we meet those 2050 obligations, and all three parties are committed to those goals together, and we'll be working really closely to make sure that happens.
Minister, thank you for joining us this morning. You canvassed a lot of material. You've clearly got a good grasp of some of the major issues that are facing the sector, facing the country in the energy sense. We are all looking for the pathway to energy transition that's sustainable, that's affordable, that provides the equity that our consumers need. And we can only do that if we work together to achieve that. All of those components we've talked about this morning, greater generation, how we transmit that around the country, the role of hydrogen, I'm a big champion there, and gas transition all play a part in a future energy sector, a future energy network which provides the decarbonisation opportunities we're looking for. So thank you for your comments this morning. We're looking forward to working with you over the years ahead as we navigate that plan, and I know that everybody in the room is looking forward to continuing that conversation with you, with the government and with officials as we find a pathway forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.